Okay, so this is our ladies line by line big book workshop. We are starting with the foreword to the second edition. Figures given in this foreword describe the fellowship as it was in 1955. Since the original foreword to this book was written in 1939, a wholesale miracle has taken place. Our earliest printing voiced the hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination already. Continues the next early text, 2s and 3s and 5 of us have sprung up in other communities. 16 years have elapsed between our first printing of this book and the presentation in 1955 of our second edition. In that brief space, Alcoholics Anonymous has mushroomed into nearly 6,000 groups whose membership is far above 150,000 recovered alcoholics. Groups are to be found in each of the United States and all of the provinces of Canada. AA has flourishing communities in the British Isles, the Scandinavian countries, South Africa, South America, Mexico, Alaska, Australia, and Hawaii. All told, promising beginnings have been made in some 50 foreign countries and U.S. possessions. Some are just now taking shape in Asia. Many of our friends encourage us by saying that this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. The spark that was to flare in the first AA group was struck at Akron, Ohio in June 1935 during a talk between a New York stockbroker and an Akron physician. 6 months earlier, the broker had been relieved of his drink obsession by a sudden spiritual experience. So the things that I personally have highlighted there, number one is the New York stockbroker is Bill W. And the Akron physician is Bob, Dr. Bob. And the one thing that I love the most is that it says that every alcoholic who journeys will find the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination already. So this is in 1955. And you have to remember that the technology of 1955 is not the same as it is today. So they could not travel as easily as we do now. So most of this is by mail. The book is being mailed out, or by traveling businessmen or military men who are traveling to different communities and carrying this message. Anyone else like to speak? Faith, you've got your hand up first.
Hi. I think it was still up from the voting, but since you called on me, I don't have much to share. I think I'll pass.
Not a problem. Jennifer, would you like to say something on this page? No? All right. Dottie?
Hi, Dottie, alcoholic. I have noted at the bottom of my page here was that, it says here in the spark was to flare into a first AA group was struck in Akron in June 1935. But back on May 12th of 1935 was when Bill and Dr. Bob met at the gatehouse, and they had, Dr. Bob was like, yeah, all right, I'll give him a half hour of my time. And it was like 5 hours have gone by and they were talking, and Dr. Bob was able to identify with Bill in so much of his story, and it was just, when I went out to Akron in my second year of sobriety, it was just amazing to see the places of where AA had started. And, when I was in the gatehouse where Bob and Bill met, it was just, you felt it, and you could hear the recordings, and it was like, it just gave me chills that, how two men sat down for 5 hours or so and talked about their alcoholism, and look at how big we are today, and look at where we're at now. We're doing a big book study through Zoom. So I'm just simply amazed. And it was just, I was like, wow, May 12th. That's, May 12th is the day I went into rehab. Very, very intoxicated, and and May 13th was the start of my sobriety. So, it's just, it touches me so much to know that, two people started this and we're here where we're at. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much, Dottie. All right, Michelle O, you have your hand up.
Hi, friends. My name is Michelle. I'm an alcoholic. I don't have a lot to contribute. I know that with me, I had to bring a dictionary to a lot of this, going through the big book. And I have written that augury is a prediction, just in case anybody else didn't know that. I just put that on top so that I knew what that meant. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Charlene, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I took it down because that's exactly what I was going to say. I looked up augury, a sign of what will happen in the future, and an omen. And I just thought that I reread the sentence. Many of our friends encouraged us by saying that this is but a beginning, only the augury of a much larger future ahead. And I just think it's interesting that they put in that word as an omen, a future happening. And look at where we are now, like even in the beginning of this, it being 16 years, I think that's right, between the times that the book was printed. And I just love the fact, and I'm not trying to reference, anything religious here, but just like the Bible, it's like, this is not changed. This is exactly how it was. And that one sentence being, this is an omen into the future. So let's keep it as it is, because this is what we feel that's going to work for everybody else, and here we are in 2020. Sorry, that's all.
Thank you. And there's a lot of these type of things hidden in this book that were futuristic predictions. Marianne.
Oh, hi. Thanks, Kimberly. I just wanted to say that last paragraph where a spark flared up, between the two men. I think, isn't that how most things happen, between sponsor and sponsee when it clicks, but aren't we lucky that happened between them, that they just, mushroom, because once you have that connection, that human connection, great things can happen. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And that is the attraction that we have in the program. All right, no more hands are up, so we will move on to the next page, XVI. Following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who had been in contact with the Oxford group of that day, he had also been greatly helped by the late Dr. William D. Silkworth, a New York specialist in alcoholism, who is now accounted no less than a medical saint by AA members, and whose story of the early days of our society appears in the next pages. From this doctor, the broker had learned the grave nature of alcoholism. Though he could not accept all of the tenets of the Oxford groups, he was convinced of the need for moral inventory, confession of personality defects, restitution to those harmed, helpfulness to others, and the necessity of belief in a dependence upon God. Prior to his journey to Akron, the broker had worked hard with many alcoholics on the theory that only an alcoholic could help an alcoholic, but he had succeeded in keeping him sober himself. The broker had gone to Akron on a business venture which had collapsed, leaving him greatly in fear that he might start drinking again. He suddenly realized that in order to save himself, he must carry his message to another alcoholic. That alcoholic turned out to be the Akron physician. This physician had repeatedly tried spiritual means to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. He sobered, never to drink again, up to the moment of his death in 1950. This seemed to prove that one alcoholic could affect another as no non-alcoholic could. So there's lots in there. Let's start at the top of the page. So following a meeting with an alcoholic friend, so that's Ebby Thatcher, who had been in contact with the Oxford group of that day. So that was a religious group, and they would try to rehabilitate alcoholics with some tenets. So they had their own set of steps. So when Bill got these steps, he didn't like all of them. So he adopted some of them, and then he created the rest. So it says the need for moral inventory, which is the step 4. Confession of personality defects, which is a 5-6, depending how you look at it. Restitution to those harmed, which is a 9. Helpfulness to others, which is step 12. And the necessity of belief in and dependence upon God. So that's 2 and 3. So mostly 3, but you have to have 2 as well. So when it's talking of the broker and the doctor, so Bill is the broker, the doctor is Dr. Bob. And he realized that in order to save himself, he must carry this message to another alcoholic. So I have noted in the side that he prayed. He actually prayed for someone to help at that moment, and then he was directed, and it talks more about that in his story later in the chapter. We got some hands up. Let's go to Megan.
Hi, I'm Megan. I'm an alcoholic. I remember actually reading in one of the stories in the back, and I can't think of exactly which one, that they had originally had 6 steps, and that was like the original before they got into the 12 steps, and how they did their 4th step was actually on our the list. What was it? The character defect sheet that we get. That was originally how they wrote their 4th step, was on that. So it was very like, it wasn't as thorough, I feel like, as we do now, like with how it describes in the book. Like this is before I think the book even came out. This is how they were working it. And, before this book, they were giving these patients the William James book, the book on spiritual experiences. And that was how they kind of gave these people an idea of what a spiritual experience was, and how this was like needed in order to actually, get into this program and to actually, do the work. So I'm a big AA history buff. I absolutely love finding out all these different things. And it says here, like you said, Kim, we admitted we were licked and that we were powerless over alcohol, made moral inventory of our defects or sins, confessed and shared our shortcomings with another person in confidence. We made a restitution for all those harmed by drinking, try to help other alcoholics with no thought of reward in money or prestige. And we prayed to whatever God we thought there was for power to practice these concepts. Although those steps had helped in the recovery of New York and Akron alcoholics, Bill felt the program was still not definitive. Maybe our 6 chunks of truth should be broken up into smaller pieces, he said. Thus, we could better get the distant reader over the barrel, and at the same time, we might be able to broaden and deepen the spiritual implications of our whole presentation. So that was in the book Pass It On. So just thought I'd share some of that info.
Thank you so much. And the page number she was referring to that shows the original Oxford tenets is 263, for those who want to jot that down. Leslie, would you like to speak on this page?
Hi there. My name is Leslie and I'm an alcoholic. No, I just went there when I saw the tenets and I went, yeah, that's like on 263. But I had it broken down that really, they did talk about, can I read them out? Number 1, because Bob, it says right there that Bob did a 6-step program, Number 1, complete deflation, which was step 1. 2, dependence and guidance from the higher power, which I have down, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 11. 3, the moral inventory was steps 4 and 11. Confession, step 5. Restitution, 8 and 9. Continuing to work with alcoholics, step 12. And yeah, he did break it down and enlarged it, and thank God. I don't know how the man did it, but I'm forever grateful, and thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, Chelsea B.
I just have written down as everything else that was said as well. but the tenets of the Oxford group, they went by the four absolutes as well, and that's one is honesty, 2 is unselfishness, 3 is purity, and 4 is love. And why this was explained to me through the Joe and Charlie's version is that because sometimes our minds like to go to the easier, softer way, and so by getting, it's like building up. If we can't take the whole thing all at once, there's still, like, you can go back and do it the easier, softer way, which is still all right. Honesty, unselfishness, purity, and love, and living by those principles. So, yeah.
So honesty, selflessness?
Okay, it's in order too. 1 is honesty, 2 is unselfishness, 3 is purity, and 4 is love.
Thank you. Can you pop?
And they're the 4 absolutes.
Perfect. Can you pop that in the chat for those who might need it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Will do.
Thank you so much. Faith?
Thank you. I just had a quick question. I've done this a couple of times, and I always hear when I do service work for our area about the principles of AA. Is that the same as the 6 steps originally? I've always been confused about what are the principles of AA. I don't know, like, where, or also, and I think the absolutes covered it, the 6 steps. Yeah. So the principles, is this where they fall in? That's all I have. So that's my question.
That I don't personally have an answer for. If someone wants to pop that in the chat, I myself know the steps, the traditions, and the concepts. Annette, you're the last one with your hand up.
Yes, hi. My name's Annette. I'm an alcoholic. And I just want to just add a little bit, just one little detail that I haven't heard yet. It says, following a meeting with an alcoholic friend who was Ebby Thatcher, thank you for that information, Kimberly, who had been in contact with the Oxford group of that day. Well, the woman's name that helped start it was Henrietta Buckler Cyberling. So I kind of just like added it on to my book, just so, you know, it can have who contacted who, like Dr. Bob and Bill W., Ebby Thatcher, and Henrietta. I just wanted to add that detail as well. And I have all the information on the steps, on the moral inventory, confession, personality defects. When I first went through these steps, and I haven't done these steps in over 19 years, and I am so excited to be doing this all over again. I'm on fire right now. I'm loving it. Last week I was a mess.
Yeah, me too. It's so awesome. Okay, Cynthia B.
Hi, yes, Cynthia B, alcoholic. Yeah, the way that I was taught, or we talk about it around here in central Wisconsin, is sort of this debate on whether the principles are the 12 steps or if it refers to a specific principle that goes with each step. So like step 1, I have the principle as honesty, and each step has a principle associated with it. Sometimes it's more connected with the 12 and 12. So I can type up what the principle is for each of those steps so you have it. That's it.
Perfect. Yeah, and my recollection is it says the principles laid out in this book. So I would think that it would be the steps myself, now that I'm sitting thinking about it. All right, we have no more hands up, so let's move on to page XVII. It also indicated that strenuous work, one alcoholic with another, was vital to permanent recovery. Hence, the two men set to work almost frantically upon alcoholics arriving in the ward of Akron City Hospital. Their very first case, a desperate one, recovered immediately and became AA number 3. He never had another drink. This work at Akron continued through the summer of 1935. There were many failures, but there was an occasional heartening success. When the broker returned to New York in the fall of 1935, the first AA group had actually been formed, though no one realized it at the time. A second small group promptly took shape at New York, to be followed in 1937 with the start of a third at Cleveland. Besides these, there were scattered alcoholics who had picked up the basic ideas in Akron or New York, who were trying to form groups in other cities. By late 1937, the number of members having substantial sobriety time behind them was sufficient to convince the membership that a new light had entered a dark world of the alcoholic. It was now time, the struggling groups thought, to place their message and unique experience before the world. This determination bore fruit in the spring of 1939 by the publication of this volume. The membership had then reached about 100 men and women. The fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous, from the titles of its own book. The flying blind period ended, and AA entered a new phase of its pioneering time. So once the Bill and Bob saw it working for themselves, they worked tirelessly to bring it to other people that were at the hospital. And like it says, they had some success and some failure. And of those success stories, when they left the hospital, they would return to their communities and set up groups in their communities and try to pass the message, which brings me to my explanation, which people might think I'm crazy. So what happened was these men go back to their communities. And so then they're spreading this message in their communities. And then those people are going and spreading the message. And if you think of it as that old telephone game that we have in elementary school, where the teacher gives one person a word and that person whispers the word to the next student, and you go around the class and each student whispers the word to the next person, and by the time it gets to the last person, the word is no longer the same. So that's my best description of what was happening to the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. Is the first person told the next person, it got a little bit changed. They told the next person, and it got a little bit changed. And so by the time it got to the 20th person, the message had been diluted or distorted. So that is when they decided that they were going to write a book. So now this would be what was passed on, and the message would stay the same. Because we can all remember that telephone game when we were younger, and by the end of the circle, the message was different. So that was what was beginning to happen to Alcoholics Anonymous. All right, we've got Joanne.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I like your analogy, and I also wanted to add that thought in a different way, because when the book started to get written, it wasn't just Bill. It was a number of different people that had tried, the premise. Some cases failed, some cases had success, but without trying. It was their path of trying that they all gained their own experience, strength, and hope, and to be able to come back together. And I'm always honored and amazed at...
Let's go to Pico, please.
Hey, can you hear me?
Sure can.
Okay, awesome. Hi, Pico Alcoholic. So I got super obsessed with this part of the book when they start talking about alcoholic number 2, alcoholic number 3, alcoholic number 4. And the one thing that stood out to me that was really cool that I just want to share history-wise was that alcoholic number 4 was AA's first young person in AA, Ernie G. And he actually went on later to marry Dr. Bob's daughter, weirdly enough. So that's my just weird little thing of, I felt it was really cool to learn that as a young person in AA, that number 4 was a young person himself. Thanks.
And what was his name? Ernie?
Ernie G.
Ernie G.
Went on to marry Sue, Dr. Bob's 17-year-old daughter.
That's cool. Thank you, Pico. All right. So, Dottie?
Hi, Dottie, alcoholic. So I was going to share on alcoholic number 3. So when Bill and Bob finally realized that, talking to another alcoholic helps another alcoholic, and they went to the hospital in Akron and talked to Sister Ignatia and asked if there was anybody there. That's when they met alcoholic number 3, and his name's Bill D. And that happened on June 26th in 1935, and you'll hear more about it on page 182 in the big book. But it's also, if you ever see the picture of the three men, that's Bob, Bill, and Bill D. And it was just, it was the more or less the true first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was when the three of them got together and went on forward. And Bill D never drank again from that time until his death, and he died a sober man. So I just find that interesting how, it all started in a hospital in Akron from a gatehouse to a hospital and so on. So that's all I have.
That's awesome. And I always love things that rhyme. So AA number 3 was Bob D, for those who like things that rhyme and are easy to remember. And now we'll go to Chelsea B.
I have a little bit of a story. Okay, so in 1937 there, it says the number of members having substantial sobriety. So at that time, there was 43 members in total. So this down at a little bit down in the bottom, it says the fledgling society, which had been nameless, now began to be called Alcoholics Anonymous from the title of its own book. So originally they weren't going to call it Alcoholics Anonymous. There was Comes the Dawn, The Way Out, 100 Men and 1 Woman, or the Bill W. movement. And they had all agreed on The Way Out. But when they went to go publish it or whatever, get the authorization, there was already 12 other books. So they didn't want to be the 13th way out. And so there was a crazy person at the institution because the rehabs were insane asylums. And there had been a crazy person that was rocking in the back of the room, overhearing everything. And he kept saying, anonymous, alcoholics, anonymous, like a parrot, like mental health issues. And so somebody picked that up, that he was saying Alcoholics Anonymous. And so they did the research and nobody had that. And that's how it got its name. Now, the thing with Bill W. in the 30s, how he writes this is it was like in the how he grew up and what he was taught is that if you repeat yourself, that's a sign that you're not intelligent. And so he's writing stuff in different words over and over, and he's saying it, but he's saying all the same thing in 1,000 different ways because that's how his brain worked. So with The Way Out, you'll see that he uses that again in this book. It's all these things that are pieced together, right? So this book, I love it. How Henrietta Sieberling got involved was that when they were calling and they were going down the list in the hotel, the 10th number they called was Reverend Tunk. And they said, we need somebody because vital up there at the top means life-giving. They had to pass this forward. They had to sponsor. And so Reverend Tunk was the one that said, oh, we know this woman that needs help. We don't know how to help her. Here she is, Henrietta Sieberling. So it's starting to come together. The hand of God is there because what are the odds already, right? So, yeah, that's my spiel. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm such an AA history dork. I love it. This is the best thing ever. With the appearance of the new book, a great deal began to happen. Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick, the noted clergyman, reviewed it with approval. In the fall of 1939, Fulton Orlicer, then editor of Liberty, printed a piece in his magazine called Alcoholics and God. This brought a rush of 800 frantic inquiries into the little New York office, which meanwhile had been established. Each inquiry was painstakingly answered. Pamphlets and books were sent out. Businessmen traveling out of existing groups were referred to these prospective newcomers. New groups started up, and it was found, to the astonishment of everyone, that AA's message could be transmitted in the mail as well as by word of mouth. By the end of 1939, it was estimated that 800 alcoholics were on their way to recovery. In the spring of 1940, John D. Rockefeller Jr. gave a dinner for many of his friends to which he invited AA members to tell their stories. News of this got on the world wires. Inquiries poured in again, and many people went to the bookstores to get the book Alcoholics Anonymous. By March 1941, the membership had shot up to 2,000. Then Jack Alexander wrote a featured article in the Saturday Evening Post and placed such a compelling picture of AA before the general public that alcoholics in need of help really deluged us. By the close of 1941, AA numbered 8,000 members. The mushrooming process was in full swing. AA had become a national institution. I'm going to stop there. So there's a lot of stuff there. So you got to remember the times, for one. This is, telephones were not as easy acceptable as they are now. Not everyone had a home phone. They were using the news wires, newspapers, mailing books, which would be they didn't get their overnight courier Amazon Prime. Like, the mail took a long time, and there weren't meetings everywhere. So the back of the book, those stories were a big factor in passing our message. And so, like, to get those numbers means something was starting, something really exciting, because in those times, getting the message out was not as easy as setting up a Zoom account and having, 120 people in front of you. Like, it took time, and like, it was growing fast. So let's share about that. Anyone have anything to say about the mushrooming period of AA? All right, Dottie. Why isn't it? There we go.
I don't know what happened there. Hi, Dottie Alcoholic. So, it was in the back in 39 when Fulton Osler wrote, that was the first article ever mentioned about AA and how it grew. All of a sudden, it went from a small group to 800 people were inquiring. And then, like 2 years later, when Jack Alexander wrote his article, it went from 800 people to 8,000 drunkards. But before Jack Alexander would print his article, he didn't believe that what he was hearing. So he had to witness it for himself, and he paid close attention to what was going on in the meetings and how people were coming in drunk like we do to becoming a spiritual being. So he was a true person of that believing is seeing, and Jack Alexander was one of those before he published the article that he wrote that more or less helped AA grow as fast as it did. And, because of that article, and it's just amazing how, once it did get out, like Kim shared, getting things out in the mail and even in print in magazines, it might have been, say, in the Northeast before it got to the South, or vice versa, or to the Midwest. It's not like today where everything, when a magazine comes out, it's out all in the same place at the same time. So it was just, once that article in 1941 was written after Rockefeller's party, it was just, it just mushroomed and grew completely. So that's all I have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and when the newspapers would get to these towns, they would still have to get a hold of New York to make the request to get the book sent. Like, so this could be like a long period of time. Cynthia.
Hi, everybody. It's Cynthia Brendage, alcoholic. I just wanted to, for those of you who are big nerds like me, my sponsor and I are currently reading the service manual together, word for word, over the phone, because that's what you do during a pandemic. So the beginning of the service manual does a great job of describing this time in really good detail. So if you're interested, go read that service manual with your sponsor. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think we have a lot of AA nerds in here that love this knowledge. Monica, I see you here. Would you like to talk?
Sure. Hi, my name is Monica. I'm an alcoholic. And I think it's important to recognize, too, that this was when World War II was happening. So it made for a very, very different time. Things like paper were in short supply. Communication was really restricted. Here in British Columbia, the first contact to the office was in 1941, but the first group wasn't until 1944. So that puts it in context in terms of how it spread across North America. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And another point on that as well as with World War is that a lot of the soldiers took it with them overseas when they were deployed. So that's how we got into other countries, is through the war, that the soldiers were taking the message with them as well. This person doesn't have a name, so we're going to have to call you iPad.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Judy O. I'm an alcoholic. How are you? Yeah, my boyfriend's working on getting that changed. It's funny, in reference to the Rockefeller stance, when Bill W. did find out that this was going to, he had very high hopes of Mr. Rockefeller contributing exorbitant amount of money, which he did actually give $50,000 for the early work of the Oxford group. And he actually, Rockefeller thought that the fellowship should be self-supporting. However, he did give $5,000 towards Bill and Bob's basic needs. I remember that. And another thing that I'm kind of a nerdy person here. I don't know if anybody realized that that Bill Wilson actually died on his 53rd wedding anniversary. I don't know if anybody knew that, but which was January 24th, I believe, 1971. Anyway, that's all for me. This meeting is terrific, and I'm glad to be joining you ladies. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good trivia to have. My sponsor actually has AA trivia nights, and so yeah, we're that dorky. All right, Faith, the last one with your hand up on this page, might as well get you. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So I'm going to save you guys having to see me in my bonnet. That's just where we're at today, reality of a mom at home and COVID. So I have this old timer. My sponsor has really pushed me in doing more service work. I actually asked her to be my service sponsor, and then I asked her to be my real AA sponsor. And there is a guy in a small town here in Indiana that is the nerd that I need to be one day. And he had a study of synchronic events between the years 1926 and 1935, which culminated at the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this book was something he created. We have an intergroup banquet every year, and he presented this book at the intergroup banquet, and it was like $6. It was so cool. And I just want to share, at this time of when AA was being formed, these were movers and shakers. And the synchronicity and a casual connecting principle. So all the people we've mentioned, Jug, Hazard, Thatcher, James, Wilson, Tunk, Seelberg, and then Dr. Bob. And in the paragraph he says in here, also, if there was a controlling factor whose job was to make AA happen, just notice the social status of the movers and shakers mentioned in this book. William James, the father of modern psychology. Dr. Carl Jung was famous for his writings. Roland Hazard was a millionaire. These are not little cheapies. You know, Ebby Thatcher's mother was the mayor of the capital city of New York State. Zebra Graves was a Broadway actor and a state senator. Shep Cornell ran for Congress and had a seat on the stock exchange. Jim Newton was a rising star in the financial world. Members of the Firestone family also played a crucial part. Henrietta Silberling was of the Goodyear Tire Company, and of course, spiritual leaders Frank Buckman and Sam Shoemaker were known worldwide. Just thought I'd share.
Thank you so much. Yeah, they were big names back then for sure. All right, no more hands. We're going to move on. Our society then entered a fearsome and exciting adolescent period. The test that it faced was this: Could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? Would there be quarrels over membership, leadership, and money? Would there be strivings for power and prestige? Would there be schisms which would split AA apart? Soon AA was beset by these very problems on every side and in every group. But out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. We had to unify our fellowship or pass off the scene. As we discovered the principles by which the individual alcoholic could live, so we had to evolve principles by which the AA groups and AA as a whole could survive and function effectively. It was thought that no alcoholic man or woman could be excluded from our society, that our leaders might serve but never govern, that each group was to be autonomous, and that there was to be no professional class of therapy. Sorry, I lost my page. There were to be no fees or dues. Our expenses were to be met by our own voluntary contributions. There was to be the least possible organization, even in our service centers. Our public relations were to be based upon attraction rather than promotion. It was decided that all members ought to be anonymous at the level of press, radio, TV, and films, and in no circumstances should we give endorsements, make alliances, or enter public controversies. This was the substance of AA's 12 traditions, which are stated in full on page 561 of this book. Though none of these principles had the force of rules or laws, they had become so widely accepted by 1950 that they were confirmed by our first international conference held at Cleveland. Today, the remarkable unity of AA is one of the greatest assets that our society has. So it speaks of that first paragraph about the adolescent years. So of course we're all alcoholics. One of our main struggles is our selfishness and our egos. And so of course there was a clashing personalities, and that became a big problem for AA, and that's where they came up with the traditions. So it kind of answered our earlier question in talking about principles, in which it's stating that the 3 sets of steps are the principles. So it's the principles we can live by, the principles which AA groups live by, and which we as a whole could survive. So that answers the previous question. Do you want me to break down the paragraph of which tradition is which number, or do you want to do that as homework to save time? Homework. I see shaking heads. Okay, so that paragraph for homework is find your numbers and match them up. I have a little paper. I have a bookmark with my traditions and my steps. So they're on page 561. So that's your homework. But let's talk about this page, Liz. Liz H.
Basically, I just was gonna say what you pretty much already said, except when it says about the principles, we discovered the principles, were the steps individual, then to me it makes sense that we have these same principles for the groups. That was it. And sometimes they vary. Like earlier someone said the first principle was honesty, and what I had as the first that went with step 1 was acceptance. So that's all I got.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Liz. Charlene?
So I'm just going back to the very beginning when it says the test that it faced was this: could these large numbers of erstwhile erratic alcoholics successfully meet and work together? The assumption that they were formally erratic is interesting to me, because I still feel erratic. Like, I don't think it's a former, behavior for me. It's something that I still struggle with. So I just thought that was a very interesting point. And they probably learned along the way that I think our brains, we are still erratic in the way that we think and accomplish things. It's just learning how to positively work with that in our sobriety. that's my opinion. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. That it was like a form, like you're formally erratic. It's like, no, I'm crazy. Sorry. Thank you.
No problem. I'm pretty crazy too. Barbara.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Absolutely.
Okay. The thing that stood out for me of what we read, and this is awesome. This is my first time being in this group, but that sentence where it says, but out of this frightening and at first disrupting experience, the conviction grew that AAs had to hang together or die separately. Anyway, I just feel really emotional about that because that's how it feels right now, and, it's amazing to me with, with a few years of sobriety, like how I live alone. My dog died like just a little while ago. So I've been feeling, I do work 3 days a week, but, sometimes I just go dive into that loneliness place and stuff. And it's like, as soon as I reach out to another alcoholic, I'm good, and, it's just so awesome. This program is so incredibly awesome. So that's just what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you. And I have that highlighted on my page that AAs have to hang together or die separately. And it's so true, especially now. Susan.
Hi. Good morning. I'm Susan and I'm an alcoholic. I couldn't figure out where to raise my hand was, so I kept clapping. But that's good. I wanted to clap. It's been awesome what I've heard. And I just wanted to say on the previous page I have marked in my book that the Bible is the most read book and the big book is the most stolen book.
It's the most owned?
Stolen.
Stolen.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I always say Oprah says the mark of a good book is that every time you read it, it changes. And that's the Bible and the big book for me every time. Rio.
Hi. Thank you for chairing the meeting and thank you ladies for all of your input. Right near the bottom of the page, it says, though none of these principles had the force of rules or laws, they had become widely accepted. And then just below that, it says the remarkable unity of AA. And I noticed in my service time that a lot of times you'll get the call of this person is breaking this tradition, or this is happening, or this group is breaking that tradition. And one of the things I love about service sponsorship is that I was taught that the reason that people want to use the traditions as rules is because we want to enforce them. We don't want to abide by them. And I remember that every time I have a situation that comes up that I've got to help explain to people about the traditions. But it's just remarkable to me how the whole common thread is about that unity, because we don't stay sober one day by ourselves, right? So thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Shanti.
Yes, hi. Good afternoon, ladies. My name is Shantae. I am an alcoholic out of Delaware. I just really appreciate this. This is my first meeting. Kimberly, thank you. You're an inspiration. I look up to you. And thanks for this platform you have here. I just want to say, before I joined AA in 2016, and was in and out the rooms. I just got back 4 months sober. But I used to think I was crazy, and through AA, I now know that I am not crazy. So thank you for bringing that up, Charlene. It is a disease, and the alcohol does intensify, our erratic behavior. And I just want to point that out. I know now that I am no longer crazy. I used to think I was. And that's a good feeling for me to know that I'm not crazy. But also, Barbara, thank you.
Shantae? Shantae, we lost your volume. All right, so it's 2 minutes to 11. Do we want to read the last page and talk about it? Or I think we should. Group. Yep, everybody's nodding. I see lots of nods. Okay, so Megan, last one to share on this page, and then we're going to move on.
Oh, just really quick. Yeah, that was the reason. Later on, 3 years later, after they had made up these 12 traditions, the only reason why the 12 and 12 came out was because of the traditions. Bill felt that if he just came out with a book that says 12 traditions, that it wouldn't be sold. So that's why he threw the steps in there also as well. And that was the main reason of the 12 and 12. That's all I wanted to share.
Thank you. I would have read the book called The 12 Traditions, but that's just me. All right, let's finish off this foreword to the second edition. While the internal difficulties of our adolescent period were being ironed out, public acceptance of AA grew by leaps and bounds. For this, there were two principal reasons: the large number of recoveries and reunited homes. These made their impressions everywhere. Of alcoholics who came to AA and really tried, 50% got sober at once and remained that way. 25% sobered up after some relapses. And among the remainder, those who stayed on with AA showed improvement. Other thousands came to a few AA meetings and first decided that they didn't want the program, but great numbers of these, about 2 out of 3, began to return as time passed. Another reason for the wide acceptance of AA was the ministration of friends in medicine, religion, and the press, together with innumerable others who became our able and persistent advocates. Without such support, AA could have made only the slowest progress. Some of the recommendations of AA's early medical and religious friends will be found further on in this book. Alcoholics Anonymous is not a religious organization. Neither does AA take any particular medical point of view, though we cooperate widely with the men of medicine as well with the men of religion. Alcohol being no respecter of persons, we are an accurate cross-section of America, and in distant lands, the same democratic evening up process is now going on. By personal religious affiliation, we include Catholics, Protestants, Jews, Hindus, and a sprinkling of Muslims and Buddhists. More than 15% of us are women. At present, our membership is pyramiding at a rate of about 20% a year. So far, upon the total problem of several million actual and potential alcoholics in the world, we have made only a scratch. In all probability, we shall never be able to touch more than a fair fraction of the alcoholic problem in all its ramifications. Upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. Yet it is our great hope that all those who have yet found no answer may begin to find one in the pages of this book and will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom. Ooh, gives me tingles. So for me, the big part that I have highlighted, and there's lots in there. So the big thing is that people were starting to accept this program because they were beginning to see it to work. Medical doctors were beginning to refer it for their patients, and they're saying, hey, there's this program, you should try it. And they were seeing success, so they were passing it on and it was being expressed. But the part that is always wildly contested is that paragraph about the percentages. So a lot of people talk about that as the success rate of AA. And I'm an accounting girl. I've worked in corporate accounting a long time. And for me, I see that as a 100% success rate because, 50% who got sober at once and really tried. So for those of you who are new, that's the biggest piece of part of that statement. They really tried. 50% got sober and stayed that way. And then 25% sobered up after some relapses. So they didn't really try the first time. And then when they really tried, they got sober. And of the rest, those who stayed on showed improvement. So 100% of them got somewhat better. So for me, that's pretty good success in my math mind. So let's see some hands and have some discussion on this last bit of the book. Anyone? All right. Ricky, is your name Ricky?
Oh.
Hi.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
I'm just really grateful. I've been around the program since 1981, and I'm coming up on 6 years in December 18th. And I feel like a little kid right here with you guys right now, because I have never gone through the big book like this. I know a lot of the history and I know a lot about it, but my book had no markings in it. Now these first few pages are like so written on. It is really, really awesome, I mean, I'm learning stuff that I could smack myself for not opening up sooner to this, So thank you, Kimberly, for opening up this big book meeting for us. And I'm going to continue to listen to you guys because this is totally awesome.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad. All right, so more on this page. Dottie.
Hi, Dottie Alcoholic. So Kim, when you were sharing about how 50%, and half the people got it, and all those numbers and all those percentages from back then, it was based on 18 people. But if we were to do the percentages now, it would be much more, I'm hoping. But, also on that last paragraph, upon the therapy and all that goes along with it, and the high road to new freedom. It's just funny that back in the day in Akron, they shared at their meetings that God is the answer. In New York, their theme was don't drink and go to meetings. And in Cleveland, use the book only. And the gentleman Clarence, who claimed he started AA because he was the first one to use the name Alcoholics Anonymous. So somebody shared earlier about somebody repeating the name of the book over and over where they went with the book. So it was the person named Clarence out in Cleveland who came up with the name of the book, but it was based on 100 people that voted on it and said, yes, that'll be the name. But it's just funny how, those three concepts we all use today, as in, God is the answer, don't drink and go to meetings, and use the book, meaning the big book. And, I love the big book, and it's funny because when I was in school, I didn't like books, and this book I like. So something's working. Thanks. Everybody have a great day.
Thank you so much. And another thing I was going to mention too, enhancing that, where she said it's only 18 people. You got to remember that back in the day, it was one woman with all these men, and most of them were like, of a certain type of people and of a certain type of background. And, at the bottom, it talks about the different affiliations. Now we're such a broad mix. And look at all the women there is. This isn't a third. This is more than a third. Charlene.
Yeah, just the very end paragraph or sentence there, upon therapy for the alcoholic himself, we surely have no monopoly. The fact that they're saying that, they're not claiming to be, the be all and end all, and we're not therapists here. We're not trying to fix you. We're saying it is our great hope that all those who have as yet found no answer may begin to find one in the pages of this book and will presently join us on the high road to a new freedom. How well placed is that in a sentence saying there's hope? But if you're a newcomer and I'm into, not saying I have a year sober, not a big deal, whatever. But I never knew that was a thing. How there are no coincidences. This is completely God-led for me. So just hearing that again, I'm getting goosebumps. It's because, this gives me a lot of insight into how I can help the newcomer, how I can help people coming into this program, because it's a high road to a new freedom, but it's your choice. I'm not saying to you that I'm a therapist. I'm not saying to you that, I have all the answers. But I have a program that's going to work and it's going to help and it's going to give you a new sense of freedom. Wow, I'm sorry. It's just I had to share that. I just think the epiphanies and the thought process that goes into this is just incredible. I wake up with a new sense of, I can do this. Wow. Sorry. Thanks.
No, don't be sorry. We love it. Thank you. 2 more people and that's it for today. Emily in St. Paul. You got to hit your mute. There you go.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Perfect. Emily, alcoholic. I just have written that, I thought was interesting that right after this edition, about a year later, was when the American Medical Association deemed that alcoholism became a disease because they're able to see that it's permanent, it's terminal, and there was physical symptoms. So I thought that was pretty cool.
That is really cool. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. Leslie R., our last sharer today.
Thank you. I just, in the beginning, it seemed like such a big percentage of people that were getting sober. And I had written down here at the time of my early sobriety, I was doing a lot of research. And I have, at this time, there was more steps being done than fellowship. And I find that, when I look in the meetings now, and New York is saying, our percentage is less than 10%. It's like, I think it's been watered down, like I get upset when I hear, meeting makers make it. And I'm like, no, meeting makers don't make it if they don't do the steps. Are you kidding me? Like, so we've got, these people in our rooms that everybody's saying, just take your time. It's okay. That's not what they did back then in the beginning. They kicked ass and got everybody to do the steps. They had a spiritual experience and then they never drank again. Right. And, I think the fellowship of, sometimes I'm like, stop with all the hugs, like the kicking ass is, I'm not saying that I want to go in and kick ass, but I just think, like we're going to kill this young girl by giving her hugs and saying, it's okay, keep on coming back. And I don't believe that that's what they did. It was pretty serious stuff, as we know. We all went through the book. And I'm done with that, but I had one other thing, and either if you could do it at the beginning of the next, I wasn't here for my first, but it would be really good if you could run off the women's stories in the book at some point. Maybe not today, but maybe at the beginning of the next. Okay, good enough.